you. I know we've been trying to do this for the past 2 weeks, and there's been some, issues. I was sick for a weekend, and then you had your car breakdown.
Yes.
So, really happy to finally be on here. And before I've been trying to come on the show for many, many years, but unfortunately, living in a rural area is really hard to get high-speed internet.
Right.
Yeah, so it's always been a hassle. I literally had 2.5 megabytes for 7 years,
Wow.
and
Wow.
yeah, super, super slow. I fought with my internet company for all that time. They still have not increased the internet speed.
Unbelievable.
And my neighbors up the road have, they have high speed internet way faster than that. So it was ridiculous. They're literally the house down the road. So yeah, it's always been a hassle. But I got a new house and I got some fast internet. So I am here. I'm ready to get the show on the road.
Excellent, excellent. A lot of people don't think about these things, Brandon. They look at us like we're so different than other people. It's like we do the same things that everybody else does. We have to eat, we have to bathe, we have to drive a car. We have to pay our bills. It's we're doing this in addition to all the other general life things that everybody else has to deal with. That's how the great work really goes. You have to make room for it in your life. You have to make time for it, and you have to just forge ahead and press forward. And things happen with us. Like we can get sick. When we're cut, we bleed. We get hungry. We get tired. We have to sleep. People tend to put content creators or people who are doing this type of work up on some kind of pedestal and think like we're not human in the ways that other people are human. Like a couple of weeks back, like you said, you were feeling under the weather. Last week, I had a car problem that prevented me getting back to my house in time to start the show. It's like we deal with these things. Can you speak to that first? Like, to just tell the listening audience, tell the viewing audience, like, that, we are not like, superhuman beings. We're just doing what we can, and we're pressing forward in the great work. That's all we can do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think people disassociate from the humanity of speakers, especially when they're viewing them on the internet, right? So they idolize them and they kind of build up this archetypal image in their head where they separate them as an actual being that has an actual life that they have to live and, go through their own turmoils and tribulations and life experiences, obviously. And we're human beings, like you said, and we have issues that come up, and we are doing this work in spite of those issues on the side. Even though we make it the primary thing, we still have to have a roof over our head. We have to have water. We got to have electricity. We have to have good internet, to be able to do this work. And to do that, we have to go out and maintain some form of monetary, money coming
That's
in.
right.
Unfortunately, even though that's horrible, but that is the way it is, or we couldn't do any of this work.
Without that, resources are required, and it's not the resources itself themselves that are the problem, that are evil or bad. It's a neutral thing, and it's what you use it for. It's just like knowledge. It's just like a tool. It's just like technology. Another thing, synchronicity keeps coming up over and over and over again. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not plan the shirt thing. Okay, we just happened to.
Oh, right.
Again, this is the third time this season that I have worn a shirt that is similar but not exactly the same as someone else, one of my guests on the show. It's unbelievable the types of synchronicities that happen, and I'm telling you, this was not planned. This is just, we basically have, clothing and that advertises our philosophy and mentality, and so it just happens to synchronize like that. What do you have to say regarding general synchronicity or synchromysticism? I know it's something that you've touched on a little bit in your work. Do you see synchronicity picking up in the modern day and in your life?
Oh, I do. Ever since I really came online and became activated, I feel like great forces from the universe have shown me symbolic synchronization through my own daily lives. And I synchronize all the time with people who are on the same wavelength or same frequency, you could say, as to some extent, not absolutely
Sure.
identical on the identical level, but yeah, absolutely. I've seen a huge increase in the synchronization within my own life. And I did speak upon this in my last presentation at the last funnel conference called Green Language, and how, synchromysticism is really a language from the universe. You know, it's really trying to tell you something, like you are on the right path, and it's trying to enhance your consciousness so that you can really do something better and build something with wisdom in your own life and in society and at the world level.
Absolutely. It's really amazing how consciousness is integrated into everything. It is fundamentally everything, and it comes through things in very profound ways like that, that kind of give us a little wink and a nod that, that underlying consciousness is always there. It's always basically, in our lives and attentive to what we are doing and working through us. So it's amazing how that expresses. Another thing that I wanted to get into before I go into some personal questions is we are now in the what is known as the occult season of sacrifice. This is something that I wanted to speak with you about last week. Last week we would have been live March 19th had it not been for my automotive problems, and that is the unofficial opening of the season of sacrifice. Really, it's 322, Skull and Bones Day, that begins it in earnest. And there's a 3-day prelude, like a countdown, sort of, a 3-day prelude, March 19th, 20th, and 21st, because the equinox happens in that time period. And then the season of sacrifice starts 322, right after the equinox, the spring equinox. So the 40-day period between 322 and May 1st, 5/1, is what is known as the occult season of sacrifice. And I know you've done a lot of research into this in your work. What do you have to say to the viewing audience regarding what the season of sacrifice actually is? Why do you think the dark occultists participate in this type of ritualistic behavior? And, what do you think maybe we might expect during the season of sacrifice this year, if anything? And just before you go into that, I wanted to say that I think we've already seen an event that was at the very beginning, the opening salvo, if you will, in this year's season of sacrifice. There was a school shooting on 322. I believe it was in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon State, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been. It's somewhere in there, but it was all over the news that day and then kind of went away very quickly right thereafter. So I think that was the actual opening of the season of sacrifice, and it always happens that way with either a shooting, a bombing, some type of false flag event, etc. So I'll go back to the question. If you want to explain to people what this season is, why you think the dark occultists engage in it, and then what we might expect in this year's season of sacrifice, if anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, the season of sacrifice definitely is something that is extremely important for each individual to really understand, because it really goes back to ancient nature cults, specifically the solar, the lunar, and the stellar cults of the world. And this is related to ancient, like, totemic rituals of blood sacrifice that has been coming down to us through religious ideas throughout tens of thousands of years that we've been experiencing these things. So it's really profound when you start to see the synchronization or the correspondence between these dark occultists who are using the ancient fertility rituals to actually, symbolically, traumatize the population and actually create mass murders and mass shootings in the world to get their agenda done. So I think it's multi-leveled. Obviously, it's extremely multi-leveled. Sometimes you have lower, rituals that are taking place, which is just like a minor sacrifice. Maybe one person dies or something like this, and that's not to devalue the individual's life. I just mean by quantity, obviously. And then you have like mega rituals that take place, which is like war. Like, these people are a death cult, really. Honestly, that's what they really are. It's just a big death cult. And this is what they do. They want to infect our consciousness with these things, and they want to siphon the energy off of these rituals that they're doing during the spring equinox specifically. That's really when it's the hot time for bloodletting sacrifices. And we see this all over the place. Actually, today, if I believe I may be correct, this is when the suicide of the Heaven's Gate cult actually took place. And you see suicide rituals that take place around this too. And you can trace this back into the Middle Ages. You can go all the way back, like I said, to totemic societies and find these rituals taking place. And, I think it's really important for people to get a grip over this, because it is a form of trauma-based mind control and psyops onto the population.
Without a doubt. I mean, this is an old title card that I'm displaying that I made as part of a presentation a few years back with all of the modern incarnations of the season of sacrifice blood rituals. And as you said, they are a death cult. There is no mistaking it. That's what we're really talking about. The people who really control our world are a cult of death. They are a satanic / Luciferian cult, and they worship death. And, people can research all of the different bloodletting rituals that have occurred during this time period. And the time period we're talking about is between, again, the spring equinox and the midpoint of spring, what they refer to in the occult world as a Sabbat, Sabbat. And the midpoint spring Sabbat is May 1st, May Day, or Walpurgisnacht, as it is called in the world of the dark occult and Satanism. So this 40-day period is called the season of sacrifice. And again, this slide that I'm showing on the screen is just some of the ritual murder and bloodletting dates that have happened in modern times. But it probably goes back into ancient human antiquity, and it's continuing into this day. Again, I made this slide back in 2017 or 2018. I could probably add 30 or 40 more events that happened, in this time period, in even the last, 5 years, 6 years. So, what is the ultimate reason that you think that they actually perform these rituals? What do you think they believe in their sick, twisted, psychopathic, ritualistic belief system that they gain as a result from doing these type of things?
I believe that they think that they're gaining some form of energetic, siphoning from these blood rituals, where they gain more power or more energy for themselves to actually control the rest of the population. Like I said, I think it's multi-layered, and I think that they're trying to trauma-based mind control the population, to create trauma in the subconscious mind collectively through these rituals, and then they can feed off of the reaction that takes place, and then they apply an artificial solution to these issues. So like you brought up the mass shooting, I think it was actually in Denver, the one that you were talking about.
I think you're correct, yes.
It took place on 3/22. And whenever we see mass shootings like this, it's multi-layered. One layer is that they're trying to bring in more gun control with this so that they can, completely have total dominance over the population. And you see this ramping up every single year, especially here in America, where we have more mass shootings than ever before, and this is totally part of that agenda. But beyond that, if you get into the mega rituals and, even some of the more occulted rituals, they're definitely trying to siphon that energy for their own means.
Without a doubt. They believe in energy transference. They believe that blood must be spilled to give it to the earth and the sun to continue to ensure that, the planting season will be successful and ensure a harvest come harvest time. These come out of very twisted ancient belief systems, again, as you said earlier, that stem out of the ancient solar, lunar, and stellar cults of the ancient world. If anything, what do you think we could expect to see out of this year's season of sacrifice? Your potential projections / predictions?
I would definitely keep an eye out for mass shootings. That's definitely a big one that's going on right now. But I mean, if we take a look at the geopolitical, type of arena, we may be looking at more war types of sacrificial rituals that take place as well. I'd keep an eye on Russia and what's going on over there. We saw a lot of this take place in the Middle East with a lot of sacrificial rituals taking place at the same time. So I would definitely look at the bigger geopolitical, events that are taking place in the world. So I would say there's going to be more soldiers that are killed. There's probably going to be innocent people, just innocent bystanders that are killed in other countries that will influence more tension between countries. But it's really just part of that agenda.
Absolutely. So, folks, please be vigilant, be on the lookout, because any potential false flag events, this is the time period that they generally try to pull that stuff off. We have to be aware and we have to stay vigilant regarding that and not get into reactionary mode because, these people use the same tactics and strategies because unfortunately they have not had to change them because people haven't been aware of how they operate. And that's what we're trying to do is, blow the whistle on that and explain to people who these people are, what their very sick, deviant mindset is, and how they go about injecting fear into the populace through these forms of trauma and ritual sacrifice. So thank you for your take on that, Brandon. What I would like to get into next is, could you tell the viewing audience a bit about your own background, your quote unquote awakening process, if there was anything like that, or if you've basically always been heading down this type of a spiritual path, and also how you delved into the world of the occult, because it's one of your specialities, as it is mine, to expose the occult world, its symbols, its rituals, etc. And that's what your presentations really deeply highlight. And I think you've done an absolutely brilliant job of exposing. So could you speak to your background and your whole way that you became interested in general and, do your work in the world of exposing occultism?
Absolutely. I have a very interesting background. My father was a rebellious individual, so he definitely saw the iniquities and inequities going on in the world, and he was, in a way, just kind of a mini me Satanist in many aspects, but he definitely espoused libertarian and anarchistic philosophies. So, for example, he made me read 1984, A Brave New World, Animal Farm, Hobbit, before I was 12. So that was required readings for myself. So my awakening process was much different than most people's. And I was homeschooled as well. And I'm very autodidactic. So, and that's because of the homeschooling. I was taught, how to think rather than what to think through many different methods, such as problem solving methodologies like the trivium. I didn't know it was called the trivium at that time, but that's what I was being taught. So yeah, it was really interesting, my background, because my father was an interesting individual who just rebelled against all forms of authority besides his own. And so he raised me with libertarian and anarchistic philosophies, and he built kind of a compound in southern Ohio called Skatopia, which he had kind of an anarchistic, community being spawned up around it. So I come from the underground punk and skateboard communities. So I really got a view of like the punk community personally, good gnosis in that community. So I got to travel all over the world when I was young. Been to multiple countries. I was multiculturally influenced as I was growing up. So, I was definitely not indoctrinated in the same ways that most people were, considering I was kept out of most of public school. I did attend some public schooling in my formative years, but once I got to my teens, it was homeschooling. He gave me the option, hey, do you want to go to homeschool or do you want to go back to public school? And I chose homeschooling. So that really benefited me with my awakening process. So I had a lot of prerequisite knowledge already programmed into me from his philosophy and his rebellious nature. And from that, I was having trouble kind of piecing all the little bits together to build a tapestry. And I'd say it was around 2010 to 11 when I started to truly be able to synthesize all these pieces of all this data that was dormant in my subconscious. And I just came online like a phoenix, is really what happened. And then I found your work after that through the influence of my uncle, Douglas Martin. And from there, I saw a lot of things that were very similar in what you were teaching and what I had learned, because you were talking about the occult. And, my dad had books like Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He had read me the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Witch when I was very young, so I read those as I grew up. I had read, the Communist Manifesto. I had read Karl Marx. I had read a lot of anarchistic literature growing up. And, so I was already on the way to that, but it doesn't mean that I didn't have my own tribulations to go through with deprogramming my subconscious, because we're affected symbolically and through trauma-based mind control through society all the time. So I had my own turmoils to go through, obviously, and my own path to overcome, to become spiritually awakened. So just because I was kept out of it to a certain extent doesn't mean that I didn't have any of those programs because it was still there. So I had to go through a deep-seated stage of depression for a long time before I really came out of it because I was very agnostic and slightly apathetic towards everything, even though I knew all this knowledge. And like I said, when I came to your work, kind of kicked me in the ass, and I was like, oh man, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for, and everything that you were putting together kind of synthesized it all in my mind. And I was like, this is all, I had heard all this stuff before, and it just put it together, and I was like, this is what it is. This is what we have to do. And from there, I went to the Free Your Mind Conference 3 in Philadelphia in 2015, I believe it was. And I got influenced by that. And then I started the Seed Conference out of my own compound, out of my own pocket, and kind of kicked my uncle in the ass to get him moving. And, Nathan Cap, who's the main host of the Cubbyhole podcast that I co-host with, got him involved with it. And then it just started to snowball from there. And I think that's something I will point out is like a lot of people fear getting involved with this because they don't think they have enough knowledge. And really, you just have to start doing something, just like whether it's a musical instrument or you're trying to paint something, you just have to pick up the instrument and start doing it. And I learned a lot more by doing presentations in that process than I did by just waiting until I was ready to do those presentations. So when I actually committed to doing the presentations, I did a lot more study. It was a project, there was a goal, there was something there that had a purpose and meaning, and I had a timeline for it, a deadline. It put pressure on me to actually elevate and do the actual research that's required.
That's right. A lot of people don't understand that, but that's a perfect explanation of how it really works. When you have a goal and when you are pushing yourself to put something out, you are driven to learn more yourself. This is how doing presentations will often help the presenter. It sharpens the skills and the knowledge of the presenter, not just, giving that information to the people that you're presenting to. Let me ask you this, because this is something I've been asking all of my guests on this season of What on Earth is Happening. What was the learning the actual technological tools like for you? Because this is something that I think a lot of people who are on the fence about speaking out have a lot of trepidation and fear related to. And this is why I host the How to Become the True Media seminars, because I want people to get over those fears. I want them to be comfortable with the tool set that is used for media creation. What was your learning curve like when you delved into technology and realized that technology is going to be a big part of doing this type of work?
That's a really good question. I was hoping that you would bring that up. It was interesting because the people that I was around as I was growing up, they were all involved in some type of technology, whether that was photography or videography or things like this, because in the skate community and punk community and music community, there's always some kind of project that you're trying to do. And usually there's people trying to document those projects. So my dad's girlfriend at one time was a photographer, so I was introduced into photography very early on. We were around producers and videographers a lot that got me involved with working with Photoshop very early on, and that was something that I did. And being out in the rural area, you don't really have access to all the distractions that you might have, in the city, obviously. So for me, computers became like my connection to the outer world, especially when I got the internet, from dial-up, super slow, but and then from there, I just started researching everything from conspiracies to anything I can get my hands on back in the mid to late 90s at that point. And then I really got involved with understanding decentralized networks and understanding how to build my own computers, probably mid 2005, 2006, early 2000s, somewhere in there. And then I got involved with torrenting after that. So torrenting was the big thing for me, to really subvert like the authority and fighting against intellectual property and all this stuff. As an anarchist, torrenting was espousing my personal ideology, and especially being poor and not having access.
Let me jump in real quick right there, because for people who may not be tech savvy, explain what torrenting is.
Okay. Yeah, torrenting is where people upload files, usually in pieces, across a decentralized network where they're seeded. And what you can do is you can access these files through a file called a torrent on, different websites. Like Pirate Bay was one of the first ones that came out. It kind of spawned off of Napster and like trying to get music out to people freely, because a lot of anarchistic philosophies believe that digital media really isn't a form of property. It is a property, but it's something that you can't really say that you're stolen from if somebody copies that property. So intellectual property can get really kind of interesting, when you get into that area of what it actually stands for, because it's an idea. You're copying an idea, and nothing has actually been removed from any other individual
Right.
besides notoriety or monetary gain. That's the only two things you could say that is removed from an individual. But torrenting was, it really is just a way that you can access files that are fragmented on the internet from a decentralized source. And what you do is you just access the file and you download it through some form of app, and then it locates these seeds all through the internet and brings it all together and builds that file for you on your system, on your hard drive, and then you have the file intact.
It's a brilliant method of decentralized file transfer and file sharing, peer-to-peer sharing. It's something that I think people should explore, learn about, really understand, and utilize, because it's probably the way that I brought into my own computers and into my own life and knowledge base. Most of the information that I have downloaded from the internet has probably come from some form of a BitTorrent connection over the years. I would say it probably accounts for over 75 to 80% of the information that I've ever downloaded. So that is very important. I teach BitTorrent in the How to Become the True Media seminar. You will learn about it. I will demonstrate it, and you will come out with a good understanding of it if any viewers out there decide to enroll and take the seminar. So let you get back to what you were talking about your background and learning curve in technology to be able to do the great work of reaching out and educating others through content creation.
Yeah, so torrenting was a big part of that. And then from there, I actually got a job at an electronics shop that my uncle owned. And then I just started to build computers and work on computers constantly. And I started to do graphic designs. My dad started a screen print process or shop out of his own property. So then I started to do all that and learning all that. But from there, I'd say the really big, crucial thing was honestly 2015. When I started to see your work and you putting together really formal presentations that looked nice and sounded good. And I was like, this is what I need to focus on, because I have all these skills. So I had skills in audio production because I deal with music a lot. I had skills in graphic designs because I've been doing graphic art since I was young. And I had the tech skills with understanding the hardware, so it was really simple for me to get that stuff. Even though I was poor, I could just scrounge and build stuff, really cheaply. And that's pretty much what I did. I mean, I ran off of a super low grade computer for so long until recently, and I still got the work done. And then I just torrented all my files that I needed for that, obviously, until I could, do other means for that. But I'd say that's really how it came about. And then I took your media course, which was so influential, and it really helped me to understand a lot of other things that I didn't quite get a grip on, because I did it all myself. I didn't really have any classes that I took. I just looked online and found the information for the problems that I was having whenever I was having those problems, unless I could diagnose that problem and solve that problem myself, obviously. But so I took your How to Become the True Media course, and I'd say it wasn't until the later classes for me that I really started to get something out of it, because I was already pretty advanced in it.
Right.
But I watched everything and I took it all in, because even the basic stuff was, it's good to go over that stuff again. And even in those earlier episodes and earlier classes, I was, still learning something from that, especially from Mac, because I'm a PC guy. Even though I did start on Mac, but I'm a PC guy. So I learned a lot about Mac from that. So I would recommend that anybody who's really trying to learn how to use this tech definitely take that course. It's well worth it. You're definitely going to gain everything that you need from it, and you'll be able to utilize it not just with the great work, but in your own life for all kinds of other applications.
That's right. It applies everywhere, especially toward the great work. But people can use this to, get resources for themselves, get job security, etc., to bring in the resources they need to do educational outreach. So, tell people a little bit about how you got started with the Seed Conference, because this has been, pun intended, a seminal event. And this is something that has really reached so many people and educated so many. And it's one of what I would consider, the best conferences that is out there in the world today. So how did you get started with deciding that you were going to become a conference organizer?
Well, like I said earlier, I got influenced by Free Your Mind 3, and then I had my own compound, and I had my own PA, and I had, just all the resources that I need at my fingertips, because we do a lot of things DIY at Skatopia. So there was just a lot of stuff laying around that we can put to use, and I had a good community around me. So I decided first, and got some other people involved to organize the event out of my own compound at Skatopia. And it was small and it was cold when we first did it. So it was really interesting because the first conference, I think it was below 30, and it was in a barn where we had to heat the barn. And everybody was in there, but they were all dedicated, but they were all bundled up, like some old school, winter a collection of people who were just trying to learn something very important. And everybody just dedicated themselves to the project. And I don't know if I intentionally knew exactly where I was going with it. I just knew that I needed to influence the people in my own community. So I had a spiritual intuition, you could say, to try to inject this knowledge, this occulted knowledge, into the punk and skateboard community that I was involved in, because what I was seeing was a bunch of fake ass punks and fake ass skaters who claimed that they wanted to destroy the state, but all they were really doing is stinking and becoming communists and socialist trash is really what they were. And it was just, that's, I can't mince words about it. That's literally what they have become. And so I was like, this is not where we should be at in this community at all. You guys say you want freedom, but you don't have the knowledge of the occult, which is the biggest thing. And you don't understand what true freedom is. You don't understand natural law. You think morality is relative. You're all postmodernist, it's got wrapped up in this left-wing ideology. So that was kind of my intention with it. I was like, I'm going to put this in these guys' face and show them the truth, and then they can do with it what they will, and that's what I did with it. And then from there, it just kind of evolved and spawned. And I was thinking, like, the name seed represents a seed of truth being planted in the subconscious mind, but it also was influenced by an old video game called Final Fantasy VIII, where there's this militia group, kind of a mercenary militia group in this game, and they called themselves Seed, and they were part of a scholarly, educational, like anarchistic system. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a great name for it. And I've changed the acronym over the years. It's kind of malleable. So I just call it Seed Truth Academy or Seed Conference at this point. But that was the purpose, to plant the seeds of truth in the subconscious mind of individuals. And I also realized that the only way that this knowledge is really going to affect the masses is by getting it on the internet. And so that was the other intention for it, which was like, hey, I need to get this out there on the internet, because digital media is really the new literature.
Right.
And this is the way that you're going to affect the most amount of people. And I really can't stand when people are like, yeah, I'm doing the great work. I told my buddy at Bob Evans the other day when I was working, the grill with him about the occult. I'm really doing the great work. I'm like, yeah, you did it with one person. How wonderful, And it's like, no, you really got to put it out there. You really got to try your best. Like, that's really low quality. I'm not saying that you're not doing something, but you really got to spread that knowledge as wide and far as possible, because this is the way that our current culture works. We get all of our information off of the internet, and it's also the most secure way to preserve this knowledge for posterity and progeny.
That's exactly right. It's something that I've been emphasizing over and over and kind of being really hard on people about because so few people are taking that message to heart and becoming public educators. And, you know, folks, I know, and Brandon knows, it's like, you know, public speaking, that's a big fear, you know, it's almost traumatizing to people. I mean, it's like people have said it's a bigger fear than death, you know. But it's like we have to push through our fears. You know, having the fear is okay. Submitting to the fear is not okay. You know, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is pushing through and doing the right thing in spite of fear's presence. Right? No one is telling you you can't ever be afraid of anything. Everyone has some fears, you know, but if you let that immobilize you and not take action, that's when it becomes a real problem. That's when it holds back your own spiritual evolutionary development, when you're not doing the things that we are all here to do, and you're not doing the right things because you're letting the fear conquer you and hold you back. So I think that's a great point that you brought up there, Brandon, is people have to, you know, put this information out far and wide. It's not just about saying it to your family or friends. It's about formalizing it and immortalizing it, as I have said. That's my little catchphrase that I've coined regarding what we need to do with information. So your work on the One Great Work Network has just been an exemplar of that. It's been, you know, just some of the top-notch content on the network. So I want to thank you for all of that work that you've put forward for people's consideration on the One Great Work Network and through your website and your conference. Next, where I would like to go is you are very strong and have a lot of knowledge and are big into putting information out regarding true Freemasonry. I'd like you to get into that and talk about what you see Freemasonry as, what is its potential, how you got into that as an occult tradition, etc. Could you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely one of the main topics that I talk about. I like to call modern lodge masonry dark masonry because obviously the lodge systems have been corrupted, perverted, and just infiltrated all around the world. But if you look into the true history of what I would consider to be Freemasonry, it goes back to these ancient nature cults of totemic societies. And if you look and compare the rites and rituals of the lodge system or dark masonry to like something that would literally wouldn't have a name back in totemic societies, you'll see the correspondence and how they've adapted these into their tradition. So I would consider Freemasonry really to be deriving all its rites and rituals from Egyptian sciences. And these Egyptian sciences, you can look at them as some of them being the teaching of morality, some of them being under the banner of the Greek idea of Hermeticism, you know, where the Greeks have taken that Egyptian science of the seven natural law principles and adapted it into Hermetic philosophies. So I think Freemasonry itself is very profound and a very important way of preserving that knowledge for posterity and progeny through symbolic expressions. And it's really interesting when you get into the wars that go on between Freemasonry. So you can see like the religious institutions have a lot of issues with Freemasonry throughout history. They've tried to demonize it, marginalize it, attack it over and over and over unless it could be co-opted. And I'm literally talking about the ancient nature cults up to the lodge tradition. And we can see this in Germany when they tried to come down in World War One and Two on the Freemasonic lodges at that time period. So it's really interesting when you see these kind of battle dynamics taking place. And I think people take things and run with them. They demonize symbols and they demonize the mystery schools. And what that does is it pushes them into one of the power centrals of the world, which is the Catholic Church. You know, it pushes them into Rome pretty much. And this is a big issue because as soon as you start to marginalize the mystery schools, whether that's Freemasonry or Kabbalah, you know, or anything else, right? The tarot, alchemy, anything like this, Hermeticism. As soon as you start doing that, you're cutting yourself off from the knowledge that you need to actually combat the elites, and they want you to do that. So you're doing the work for them. by doing this, by saying, okay, it's all Freemasonry. So a lot of people think like they have this false notion that the world is ran by like one group of people from one secret society. Like it's all the Freemasons, it's all the Jesuits, it's all the Zionists, or, it's always one of these things when it's actually ran by a gigantic plethora of different organizations and different societies and all kinds of races and ethnical backgrounds and people from all over the world. And sorry about my dog; she barks at
Oh,
a
that's
lot of
that's
people.
quite all right.
Yeah, I have three huskies. So,
Awesome.
but yeah, it's just so wild when people do that because they're actually, like I said, they're actually attacking the systems that they need, at least the knowledge that they need to actually combat the mind control that they're under.
That's
So
right.
they see, let's see,
It's a unidimensional, it's a very unidimensional mindset that a lot of these people have. Through religion, they have been conditioned so much and so perfectly, really, to see the world of the occult knowledge as something that should just be shunned and pushed to the side and ignored and looked at as just evil. And that unidimensional perspective is really going to hold people's progress back in consciousness. As you said, this is exactly what we need to know to combat all of the social engineering and mind control that's been done in our society. And by shunning it and saying, I'm going to put that in a box and say that's all evil and that's all to not be considered because my religion told me so, it's like literally cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Absolutely, very well said with that. I mean, it's like I have the Masonic, square and compass in my background, and people will look at that and they're like, "Oh, you're a Mason," and you put out all this crazy information about Freemasonry. You must be part of the agenda, then. So they have no ability to do true investigative process, and that's kind of a big issue when it comes to like how we're trying to justify using self-defense against people, right? So if you can just take one symbol, if you wear a symbol on your chest and say, okay, that person must be affiliated with the elite because he's wearing an all-seeing eye, immediately you already know that they've been gotten. They're hacked.
Right.
Their mind is broken. Because you have to have compounding investigative research and empirical data to say, okay, he has an Illuminati symbol. Now, what else can connect him to the Illuminati, right? So you can't just run with it. It's like someone wearing a swastika. And the dangers of this is it leads to what we know as cancel culture, right? So cancel culture is actually what has pretty much eliminated all of the occult sciences that we're trying to put back together in the current world, So it's because of cancel culture that the libraries were burned, that the temples are destroyed, and this type of mindset actually is counterproductive to actually bringing about true change and true freedom holistically for the species.
That's right. I mean, just recently when I went on InfoWars the last time that I did, I was wearing this Mjolnir hammer, and people in comments sections were saying like, he's wearing an inverted cross, he's still a Satanist. It's like just blatantly showing their ignorance that you don't know that the Mjolnir hammer in the Norse tradition is a symbol of morality and is a symbol of uprightness and right action. I mean, the ignorance in our society is really astounding, and how people like run with their own notions of what they think symbols mean. They have no framework for what they have traditionally been used to represent in different cultures throughout the world. I think you're exactly correct. What we really need is symbol literacy, and we need an occult revival, which is what we're trying to foment. We need a better understanding of occult symbolism and philosophy if we're going to get out of this mess that we're in as a species.
Absolutely. I said that in my fake ass punks presentation that we need kind of an occult revelation of sort, that we need to have an intuitive idea about the occult, because a lot of the natural laws you can only intuit, right? Some of them it has to be done through the intuition combined with the intellect, but mainly you're bringing that information in through the intuition. And that is where a lot of left brain eggheads get stuck at, because they don't have the concept of intuition, right? And the world doesn't have correlative thinking. Our correlative thinking, our brain hemispheres have been pretty much cleaved down the middle, and we have been put into an internal schism, and that's one of the biggest issues that I see going on, is that we do not have balanced brain hemispheres of the masculine and feminine sides of our consciousness and our left brain and right brain of our cerebral. So that's a big issue when it comes to correlated thinking, because if you have that divide within yourself, then you're always going to see things from that perspective, and you're going to demonize things. You're going to be easily controlled by the masses. So symbolic literacy is something that I try to teach to people all the time. I think that's a really, really fundamental thing for awakening, is becoming symbolically literate. And it's also, if you get into the deep psychology of it, if you study Jungian psychology or any other great psychologist, you're going to find that these are archetypal forms that are universally inherent in our consciousness. And that's why they're so prevalent. And it's not just because the dark occult is using them. The dark occult didn't really create these symbols. They've taken these symbols and perverted them and inverted them and started to use them against us. So the symbols are just the representations of the ideas. They're frequencies in form. They're a form of cymatics in a way. And what cymatics is the science of frequency governing form or matter. And so that's really what this is. They're ideas being constructed and formulated. So it's information. That's why that word is information, right? At ion. So that's a little wordplay there. So I think it's a really big issue when people come to me and they're like, oh, symbols can just mean whatever you want them to mean. And it's like, well, at a certain level, you can say that's true, but objectively, symbols are inherent in nature, and they're a way that nature communicates with us. And we see these fundamental archetype forms all over the place, whether that's in our own consciousness, in our dreams, when we're doing introspective work into our shadow self and things like this. So I think people demonize, it's easy for them to demonize the facsimile or the proxy of the idea rather than actually dealing with it. And this is what we see with, the political agendas that are going on in cancel culture, with censoring words and censoring symbols and all that stuff. They're trying to fight the effect rather than getting to the causality.
That's right.
And that's why they destroy statues and temples and all this stuff, and it's never going to change. That's never actually going to make a change. If you do, let's say you do have a racist and he actually is implementing harm on people, and you're like, well, we're going to censor his symbols and his words to get him to stop doing that. You don't think that person will find other means to do that? Come on. You got to be joking me, that he will find another way to actually discriminate against you, whether it's physically, verbally, or symbolically. He's going to find another way. This is what they do. And this is what humans are, they have ingenuity, they'll find another way. That's the thing about this.
I find that absolutely true and pertinent in our society today, what you're saying regarding what cancel culture does with words and symbols. It's a very dangerous, potential, viral, false, axiomatic belief system that is a very dangerous path to tread down. And, I unfortunately see it in the alleged freedom desiring community, with the demonizing of symbols. How many people have said, oh, I don't like the all-seeing eye symbol on, the One Great Work Network or on What on Earth is Happening. It's like, well, have you heard my extended explanation of what it actually represents symbolically throughout all time? Have you heard my breakdown of the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States symbol that's on the back of the dollar bill and what it really means? And people just have these snap judgments, and they're not using their intuition because of their left brain imbalance. They're not really looking at it from a holistic perspective, both mentally, psychologically, and spiritually. And it's like, that's what keeping an open mind really enables. It enables you to stop seeing things from a unidimensional perspective and see it from a much more multi-dimensional, multi-tiered perspective, where symbols can definitely mean different things depending on how they are used. And they take on a whole different vibratory energy and a whole different frequency depending on the intent that is behind them and the way that they're being used to influence consciousness. So I think what you've said there is absolutely profound, and more people have to really take that to heart and investigate that avenue of understanding of symbolism. I know it's a big part of what you do and a huge part of what I do as well. Let me ask you this regarding Freemasonry and symbolism. Who are some of the authors that you would say that people should look into that particular occult tradition and check their books out on the symbolism, rites, practices, origins, etc., of the Freemasonic tradition? Who are some of your favorite authors in that regard?
Yeah, it's interesting. You had also asked me earlier, which I'll answer the earlier question. You asked me how I got into
Yes.
Freemasonry, and it was through listening to your podcast, Michael Tessarion's work, and Jordan Maxwell's work is really what, kicked me off into starting to study the mystery schools themselves in totality. But I'd say the authors that I would recommend, if you really want to get to the roots of Freemasonry, I would definitely recommend Albert Churchward. I think he's one of the most profound authors on the origins of Freemasonic tradition, and he really brings a plethora of great knowledge to that. He was documenting a lot of things in his medical journals when he was in Africa, studying Egyptology and the Egyptian sciences there. And his books are just really profound. But there's so many great ones. Let's see here. What are some of the other guys that I listen to, or I can't really think of any right now for some reason.
I love Churchward's book on the origins of Freemasonry as connected with the origins of humanity, something to that effect. I was actually just recommending that book last night to a friend, and that is one of the most profound breakdowns of where Freemasonry came from, again, from these ancient totemic cults of the stellar, lunar, and solar cults. And what I find great about that book by Churchward in particular is he ends it talking about the dangers of socialism in the last chapter and how that will lead to a total breakdown and dysfunction of our society. This is what I'm going to really get into in Two Masks, Same Face, the dark occult origins of Nazism and communism, because they're both different forms of socialism. Nazism is national socialism and communism is international socialism. They all stem from the same basic mental ideology, which is collectivism. And that's the basis of how the dark occult world wants to rope people in and herd them together and make them into a collectivist consciousness. As Michael Tessarion often says, they are trying to treat humanity as they are one neck in one noose, to put one noose around one neck. That is what collectivism prepares people for. And that is what the ideology of socialism ultimately creates. So, Churchward is brilliant. I love his material. I like other authors like C.W. Leadbeater, of course, Manly P. Hall. I think the Mystery Babylon series exposed a lot about Freemasonry, in particular the dark form of Freemasonry and the lodge system by William Cooper was seminal for me in delving more into some of the symbolism and rituals of Freemasonry.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Manly P. Hall's background, which, by the way, it was just his birthday last 18th, I believe it was, the 18th or 19th, so just last week was Manly P. Hall's birthday. But is that he was appointed the 33rd degree without ever being initiated into the lodge system because of his work, and that's really profound. And I think that's really important for people to understand, because they'll look at Manly P. Hall and be like, oh, he was a Freemason. He's part of the agenda. Again, this false accusation, this association by guilt fallacy. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like that's actually a good thing that he was appointed to that degree because of what he did. And I would, I or you even would deserve that degree in that manner.
I was just going to say, the both of us should lobby for going into the lodge system and teaching it, because we can really illuminate it for sure. And they would definitely benefit from the esoteric teachings that we could bring in there that often are not being brought into the dark system of Freemasonic lodge systems in the modern day. I'd say some lodge systems may be doing that, but all too few. If there are people who head their own lodge systems in the Freemasonic tradition, if you are looking for people to come in and teach true morality from a Masonic perspective, look no further. Bring some of us into the fold. We are outsiders like Manly P. Hall was, but believe me, we would definitely be able to do the same type of work. And it's just a matter of people making that happen. We're not current initiates because we're not going to take vows and go into the lodge system. But I would go into it to teach the lodge system if that offer were made available unto me. And the only way that could really happen is by the conference of the honorary 33rd degree. So I would accept that.
I don't know, something like that. You might need to run it through the 34th dude, but wow, man, want to go into there and like lay down the law to him in a sense.
Brandon would accept that if they're Masons who had their lodges out there that want us to come in and do work like that. I would certainly take them up on that offer if they would work to confer that honorary degree onto us. And I think it would be deserved in both cases. And in other cases where people teach profound symbolic.
No way, man. I'd be wanting to go in and lay down the law to them, man. Dang.
Literacy and moral,
that's not man's law we're talking about there either. Holy
understanding
crap.
From an objective view of objective morality and natural law as connected with the true Masonic tradition. There would be no problem with us doing that, So just throwing that out there. I've thrown it out there many times before on the show. I'm just doing it again because I think you would be a perfect candidate for that.
He's got some balls for that, though. He might not come back out, especially after burlesque show and they get him all doped up and freaking drunk and shit.
As well, Brandon. So let me ask you this. Where do you see humanity headed in, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see all of our society in general going in light of the whole, post-pandemic world, in light of all of the wars and rumors of wars that are circulating? Where do you see us going as a species within the next decade?
I mean, I would love to get on here and tell you that everything's going to be fine. But honestly, what I see is the decline in consciousness more than an elevation of consciousness. I think people are more divided and more mind controlled than, let's say, back in the 90s, for example. I think people were more...
Yeah, you gotta thank the fans only for that. And then I do blame Oogle on a lot of shit too. Farce Book, MySpace was the starting beta. It's like we've found other beta tests before it goes big, like Shadowbox a long time ago.
And it was easier to access information that could help them back then than it is now, because it's just so flooded. The internet's so flooded with so much misinformation, and people don't know where the accurate sources are. And they just watch the media all the time on YouTube, or, they just go to these really toxic avenues for their information. I think that most likely, in my prediction, I don't see an immense amount of change taking place unless we get the numbers behind us when we're talking about teaching natural law. And if that change doesn't take place, then obviously, a hot revolution may become necessary at some point. And all of my work has been to avoid that. But the way that we have to avoid that is collectively. We have to...
It's same here. All of my research and work has been to avoid hot situations.
Understand natural law principles and morality and the occult. That is a requirement. We have to understand the occult to some extent to be able to avoid these kinds of negative outcomes. I just see people going down the drain and just constantly buying into the mind control and not doing any work on themselves, and not doing the shadow work, and they're just all stuck in moral relativism and solipsism. And I think that's a big issue, because people are just so trapped in the survival mode of their life, and they don't feel that anything that they see is of any importance. And the attention span is a big issue too. They don't have a good attention span to be able to actually look at these things and spend time on them. And one reason for not spending time on it is because they don't see any value in it, because they don't believe that they have the power to create change. And so, like, if you ask your common neighbor or somebody on the streets, like, if they see problems in the world and they have issues with government at some level, they'll definitely tell you yes. In most cases, they'll tell you yes, but they're powerless to create change because they still believe in authority. They believe that authority is going to solve their problems for them. So they abdicate their own personal responsibility onto these authority figures. And as long as we continue to believe in authority, we're going to get exactly the same, but multiplied, millions of times worse. And I mean, I hate to, get on here and just tell you a lie, but I'm going to tell you the truth. It's not looking good. I mean, we have these small snow globe bubbles of awakening where, you got the One Great Work community, which is amazing. And compared to 2015, when I first started doing it, there's so many more speakers coming out and doing stuff. So that's a really positive thing. But I would expect it to be more infectious into the people's mind, like a brush fire. I would expect these ideas to be spreading at a rapid rate across the world. And I just don't see that.
I think what is missing is individuals who have learned what is really going on are very loath to speak out publicly. And it goes back to that whole condition of fear and allowing fear to control you, allowing fear to stop you from taking right action. What do you think that we could possibly do to inspire more people to speak out publicly? Because obviously that's really the answer and the solution.
I think it depends on why they have that fear, because a lot of people don't speak out publicly because they fear they don't have the knowledge. Some people fear that they may be ridiculed or shamed for it. They fear that they're going to lose friends or families or be able to do social activities. And some of it's just a conglomeration of all of it, all of it thrown together. So it's a multitude of things. But the way that I influence people is by asking them where they feel their skills are really at. So if you have music, if you have musical skills, why don't you put it into your music? If you have artistic skills, put it in your art. I mean, for me personally, I was never a live speaker. I always hated being in front of the cameras. One reason why I hated it was because they were always around me in my everyday life, just following me around at Skatopia and all these skate trips and stuff. So I always hated being in front of the cameras, and I hated live speaking. So the way that I got over that fear was just doing it. I just had to take that step. And I think people just don't take that leap of faith. They don't initiate that pull card and actually to, just trust in their ability and kind of get out of the mindset of thinking and comparing themselves to what other people think about them, comparing their own value to what other people are going to say about them or how they interpret the knowledge or whether they're doing a good job with what they're doing or not. You just have to really step into that, step onto the base and be ready to do that action, and perform that action. So it's really difficult. I think a lot of people are very depressed as well because they're being so oppressed, and they don't realize that a lot of the depression that they're suffering from comes from being in a system of slavery. It's one of the biggest things that's causing all that, and they just can't connect it. They think it's because they don't have enough money, which can connect to that, but they put that as the totality of it. And so I think, being a positive influence and just showing them that they can do it and showing them your own journey. So that's what I show the people who I talk to personally. I'm like, look, this is where I came from. This is how bad I was at the beginning, which wasn't really that bad, even though I thought I was really bad. And then this is where I'm at now. And look at how much I've progressed and look at how much of an effect I've really had in that. So I think that's really important, is showing people your progression, because it can really inspire and motivate people to do that. Just like with any sport or any musical instrument, whenever I saw my idol guitar player and his first days of playing music, I'm like, oh, that's where I started from. We all start from our own level of consciousness, and then you progress. And if you don't start, then you're not going to go
That's
anywhere.
right.
You're not going to you're not going to progress.
I think that's a profound answer. I think that's exactly true. I think showing people through example is one of the most powerful ways to do it. I tried to show people other people's example by bringing other content creators forward, highlighting their work, showing people, hey, it's not just me doing this. These guys are doing this too. You guys could do it as well, you know? And as you said, it's about starting. You know, people think, oh, well, I'm depressed. I have to wait until I'm out of this negative feeling to initiate something. It's the exact other way around, and it's proven. It's actually scientifically proven. When you just begin action, you know, you'll actually feel better. This is like why people who aren't going to work out or go to the gym and they're feeling really bad, and you know, they don't have good endorphins, endogenous morphins moving through them, you know, then they're feeling bad. But once they start the actual action, you know, the kinetic real world action, then, you know, the energy system of the body starts flowing and you feel better. It will actually elevate your spirits. It will actually elevate your mood when you do the work. Work is one of the main ways that people will step beyond themselves and help to improve themselves and feel better. And not just feel better about themselves, but feel better in general because they're actually doing the right thing, you know? So I think, you know, that's an actual perfect answer to that question. It wraps it up very perfectly. The last thing that I want to get into is what projects do you have on the horizon? You know, where is your work headed? And if you want to interject any other topics before we maybe go to calls in the last half hour, feel free to go right ahead. Tell people about what you're doing these days and what's coming in the future.
Absolutely. I'd like to add one more thing to
Sure.
our last statement, which is service to others is the work, and it really helps people to get out of that state of depression. I know that when I was in depression, one technique of therapy that I used was starting to care about doing things for other people, and I think that really helps. And this kind of work is doing the work for other people, and that's part of the requirements for the mystery schools as well. Is that, you know, if one is suffering, we all are suffering.
That's
so
right.
we have to understand the connectivity between all of us. And if you don't know that, then you won't pass, you know, in consciousness. I'm not talking about from authority. I'm talking about in consciousness. You're not going to pass the next level that you need to go to. But as far as my next work, I have 2 presentations in the work currently. I will be speaking at Funnel 3. Let me pull that up here, which is taking place June 25th and 26th, I believe. 24th and 25th of June, which is called the Trivium, and that's done. That was organized by Will and a bunch of other people around that, which is just doing a phenomenal job. I saw this conference come out after my conference, and it really, you know, kind of lit a fire under my ass to continue my conference, because for a minute I was like, you know, I might want to take a hiatus from it. And I was like, oh man, you know, these guys, they're doing some good stuff, and they were inspired by my conference at a certain level. And I was like, this is really awesome. So now we're working together and feeding off each other. And I'll be speaking at that conference. I have a presentation called The Spirit of Freedom. And let me get the subtitle here. Unleashing the Source and Strength of Freedom Through Natural Law. So I'm just going to be talking about what spirit actually is. I'm going to be talking about what motivation inspires me and inspires other people to invoke, you know, the spirit of freedom from within. So I use the title card of the Phoenix for this, because I think we need to bring that Phoenix energy back out of us. I think we need to dissolve, you know, all the unnecessary barriers to being able to manifest freedom. So I'm really going to get into psychopathy. I'm going to get into, you know, the unholy trinity and the proper use of the trivium, considering that the trivium is the name of the conference. So I'm going to talk about that in a more esoteric way rather than just the common way that a lot of people probably will be explaining it. And then I have the Seed 5 Metamorphosis Conference coming up in September 24th and 25th, which I don't have a topic for that yet, but I will be presenting at that conference. And then there's tons of top caliber speakers that are going to be there. You included, Mark. We have Will Keller, we have Chris Jansen, we have Leslie Powers, Douglas Martin, Nathan Cap, we have Colin Smith. We have so many so many great speakers. So I would highly recommend people to check that out. And you can find more information about that at seedtruth.com with all the speakers there and all their bios and links to their work.
Excellent, excellent. I think at the next Seed Conference, my own presentation is going to be on the true 7 deadly sins, which is something that I've wanted to formalize in a presentation for a while. So I think that's where I'm going to go with my presentation as part of that event. Excellent. So Seed Truth is the main website that you could find Brandon Martin's work at. Brandon, what do you think? You want to go to the phones and take some calls?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Give me a moment here. All right. Let's see who's holding on the line. Let's hear from Johanna. Johanna, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin of seedtruth.com. Welcome. So to all callers, please be ready to unmute yourself with the large blue microphone icon at the bottom of your call window. When I call on you, I will unmute you from the server end, and then you must additionally unmute yourself. So let's see if Johanna can unmute. All right, I will come back to you. Let's hear from Gene. Gene, you are live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome. It seems like at the beginning of each call session, this always occurs. So please be ready to unmute, ladies and gentlemen, waiting in the call room. All right, so Gene, I'll come back to you. Let's hear from Robert. Robert, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin.
Hi, listeners, Brandon and Mark. Thank you for getting into the call.
Absolutely.
So I just listened to this show, and my addition would be that I think maybe there would have been some agile methods to join in for those people who are not fully prepared but have enough knowledge to get started with little projects.
Sure. Brandon, your take on that. People who may not feel like they're 100% fully prepared to do like a large project, is it good advice that they just start very small?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I started doing memes. I started to actually adapt a lot of Mark's work and a lot of other researchers' work and kind of emulate that and kind of learning from the peers out there and putting it into graphic designs, So memes was a big thing, so I got creative with memes. So those are small projects you can do. I'm also a musician, so I would put it in my music, just writing different songs, poetry, things like this. So yeah, you can definitely build up momentum by starting small. You don't need to just jump in all at once and do a 400 slide presentation. I actually learned from the first Seed conference where I had probably like 12 hours of slides put together, and I was like, oh yeah, I can get through this in 3 hours, no problem. And it was like there's no way I could get through all those slides. But it actually gave me the skill set and understanding how to formulate presentations and getting the skills for like PowerPoint and things like this. So yes, start small and work your way up, but don't limit yourself. You're trying to push beyond your boundaries. You're trying to push beyond what you think is possible, So don't overexert yourself and hurt yourself by becoming too exhausted that you get burned out, but also make sure that you're at least every once in a while pushing that boundary and breaking those boundaries.
Without a doubt. I think that's excellent advice for people who just want to start out, who don't want to, take on too much and bite off more than they can chew. It's all about getting started, and you could always improve upon your workflow, your content as you go. This is a big tenet that I talk about in the How to Become the True Media seminar is start small and build upon your work as you go. You don't need to be perfect, and you don't need to have the biggest operation on earth. It's about becoming comfortable with doing this type of work. It's about putting information out there and helping to raise awareness of truth and help people to understand things that they may not have understood before. And you could do that even in a small way. It makes a big impact, and it helps a lot in the overall scheme of things. So I think that's great advice. Let's hear from Darren. Darren, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin of SeedTruth.com.
There we go. Watch it.
Darren, go ahead and unmute yourself with the large microphone icon at the bottom of the call window. There you go.
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
I'm all right. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I really appreciate the work that you do, and previously, I used to have these hang-ups about technology. I was kind of a Luddite.
Mm-hmm.
It was mostly because I couldn't afford it.
Mhm.
So instead of feeling bad, I was like, oh, that's just crap. So now that I'm doing better, and financially I have the means, I'm learning the technologies, and I really want to start creating some content before next year, and I'm in a position to do so now. But my question to you guys is, how much of your personal story, like your background in Satanism, Mark, did you include? And I ask this because I was kind of growing up kind of dogged and harassed, for being a free thinker, and so I do have some kind of traumatic hang-ups about, let's say, being othered, being ostracized.
Mhm.
How do you cope with that when breaking into content creation?
That's a really excellent question, actually, and I'll take this one first, Brandon, if you don't mind, and then I'll pass this over to you. Now, what I will say is, when I first decided that I was going to speak publicly about what I knew, in all of these areas of knowledge, I had to make a decision as to whether I was going to tell people about my personal background at all, or whether I was just going to keep that private. And after mulling that thought over for a while, I said there is no way I could keep this information private about what I was personally involved with. That's a huge part. My background is a huge part of the What on Earth is Happening story. And if I did not make that public, I would have to consider myself sort of a hypocrite, because I'm trying to advocate to tell people the truth about what's going on. And if I'm leaving out a big portion of the truth about my background just because I'm worried about what people will think of that, then, that's not the right way to go about it. So, I decided I'm going to be honest with people about my background and tell them that I was into Satanism. And not only because it's the right thing to do to not lie by omission, but because I think that would help people to understand, if an individual that was this deeply embedded in the satanic ego mindset can come out of it and can learn the truth and then promote the truth to other people and teach it, then anybody can do that. That it's not, this is not something that is an insurmountable task to come from one perspective and one ideology, make the recognition that you were incorrect because new information came in that proved to you sufficiently that this isn't the way to live, this isn't the way to think, this isn't the way to be. And then I changed my behavior as a result. That real world life example, it acts as an inspiration for other people. And that's one of the main reasons I didn't want to leave that background out. That's why I decided to go ahead and tell people about my background before even getting into deeper parts of my work. Brandon, your take on that, and about talking about your background, even if you're not proud of it, or if it's something that is dark and maybe might put some other people off. I think that's a really great question. That's my take on it. Your take on that, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. I come from the ideology of anonymity being a very good thing. So for a time period, I did not want to actually put my name on my own work, because it's kind of a philosophy that goes with the anarchist community. If you study anarchism quite a bit, then you will find that they like to be anonymous. It's a big thing. But I think it's really important because putting your name on your own work and putting your face on it, because it actually humanizes your work and people can connect with it a lot more on a very sensual level and a very spiritual level as well. So they're going to really be able to relate with it a lot easier if they can see your face and actually see. Sorry about my dog.
That's okay.
But actually relate with you. Yeah.
I fully agree. I think that it definitely humanizes you. It makes people realize that you're in the same boat as everybody else, that you make mistakes, that you can recover from your mistakes, that everyone has flaws, that no one is perfect, and that we are all trying to move forward as best as we can in consciousness. So I think that's why it's a good idea to include that if you're going to become a serious public figure that is putting out content. I think it's probably a wise thing to do, to embrace your past failures and mistakes, own up to them, admit them, and even talk about them publicly, and make it a part of the whole journey, the whole process in your work in general. Excellent callers so far, great questions. Let's hear from, and I'll just give Brandon a moment. He's just putting his dogs out of the rooms so that they don't interfere with noise with barking. So I'll just take a second here, and because I want him to hear the caller's question. All right, Brandon, we're going to go to another caller. Let's hear from Christopher. Christopher, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin. Go right ahead. Christopher, you have to unmute with the large blue microphone icon at the bottom of the call window. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Don't know how I knew that you were going to call on me just now. I wasn't hooked up. You were talking about, how do you say, anonymity?
Yes.
Put your name out there.
Mm-hmm.
I actually myself have had to struggle with that, and doing some these videos I've been putting out myself, and putting my name to it and my face out there. And it is a very kind of scary thing to do at first.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a couple of years ago when I first called into your show, Mark, and I was very nervous about it because I'd never done it. I'd never been on a show that there's several listeners,
Sure.
I guess my question would be how aside from just doing it, just do it, just get it done. What would be the advice to someone who's just starting out to keep going?
Yeah, that's a great question. Brandon, when people begin, often they get a little bit despondent about not getting traction immediately. Your advice to people like that who are just starting out and, may become a little bit, depressed or upset because, they're not getting the viewership that they want, or they feel like enough people aren't listening. Your advice to them about persistence and how they can inspire themselves to keep going. Great question, Christopher.
Yes, I think that's an amazing question. Can you take this, because my dog is being really loud?
No, we're okay. We're hearing you pretty well.
Oh, okay. As long as she's not interfering, because she's really loud in my room. Yeah, I think that a lot of people have an expectation of what they should get. They want instant gratification from the viewership or the likes that they're getting, right? Because this is the kind of social media world that we are living in right now. And you kind of have to separate from all that. You have to disattach from it. You have to take your ego out of that modality of thinking, and you have to just put it out there. And no matter whether you're getting a bunch of likes or not, you know that you're doing what is right, and you know that you're aligning with the universal purpose, and you know that you're doing what's going to be best for the children and for truth and for freedom. And even if you can only reach one person, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it if you only reach that one person.
And you never know who that individual may be as well. That's why I say it doesn't matter. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to stay persistent and keep moving forward, because you never know who you may influence and what their influence may be with others as well. Who knows if you wake up a very famous person who has an audience of millions and millions of people, or even tens of millions, what kind of influence you might have. So that's why it's very important to keep going, and you never know who might stumble upon your work. I get emails from people every day that say, I just stumbled upon your work this week accidentally. It happens all the time, and you never know who that individual is going to be. So that's great advice, Brandon, for people to just keep doing it, because it's the right thing to do. Number one, first and foremost, you're serving the truth. Even before you're serving others, service to truth has to ultimately come first. And, we can't necessarily see around certain corners and know where this work is going to take us or other people. So that's why it's just important to, put your nose to the grindstone and keep at it. Great questions so far. Let's hear from George. George, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with Brandon Martin. Welcome. Once again, folks, please unmute with the large blue microphone icon at the bottom of the call window in Telegram. All right, George, I'll come back to you. Let's hear from Roderick. Roderick, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin of SeedTruth.com. Go right ahead.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I've been following you for so many years, and it's a true pleasure and privilege to be given the opportunity to speak. I really appreciate it, Mark.
Sure.
And, Brandon, great show. And I wanted to maybe expand a little bit and get your guys' opinion, because I'm a true believer of the fundamental of what the computer industry preaches all the time, which is garbage in, garbage out. Reason for what I do for a living, which is nutrition. So I'm a pretty firm believer of starting with the fundamentals, which is not only when it comes to nutrition, but computers in general as well. To put in the good stuff in your body or in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
in this instance. So I just wanted to ask you, Brandon, perhaps to expand a little bit about that, on the importance of influencing others around you, and also starting with ingesting, whether it's mentally or in the form of food, to putting good stuff in your system.
Yes, absolutely. I think this all goes back to what I was talking about with the trivium and input, processing, output. So you were talking about, being involved with the computer publishing and tech ideas. And that's really what, we're not identical to computers, but we definitely are computers at a certain level. So putting in good quality information into your body, into your consciousness, whether that's food or whether that's some form of media, is extremely important for the healthy actions and the wise actions to be manifested into the world. So I think we need to program ourselves with those good nutrients, and that nutrients can be data as well.
Without a doubt. I mean, it all comes down to the principle that whatever you're putting in quality is going to be what is ultimately transformed energetically and then put back out into the world. In a sense, the universe is a mirror in that sense, and as a microcosmic reflection of that macrocosmic mirror, we work the same way, and that works in the form, as our caller George said, in the form of not only information but in the form of physical fuels as well, which is why at some point I have to revisit that topic yet again and try to get to people some common sense understanding of nutrition, and try to dispel some of the myths about things that are put out there regarding fad diets, and people talking about certain foods being detrimental. I want to it's something I want to revisit, or maybe even do a formal presentation on at some point. Let's hear from Zena. Zena, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin. Okay, there you go.
Hey, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm actually in the middle of repainting my bathroom. I was not expecting to hear my name, but it's actually awesome to hear it coming out from someone who's heavily influenced my last, I'd say, year or two. Relatively new to your work. Brandon, I apologize. I'm not too familiar with your stuff yet, but
all good.
Good company for sure. Yeah. And I actually have written down some things when listening to you talk in the past. I would have to agree that it would take a certain level of suffering to help with more people pulling the wool over their eyes. That certainly was the case for me. And however, that being the case is, it gives me a good feeling. It makes me more optimistic, knowing that someone like me and anyone around me, perhaps, that I can help influence is also on their way. Just sometimes takes a little whack into the legs to figure out how they actually work.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, I don't really have much else to
no,
say
that's
about
okay.
that.
That's a good jumping off point there. Thank you for that, Zena. I appreciate that. Brandon, your take on, do people really need to suffer to change? Is change possible without people going through that level of deep suffering? Because, yeah, Zena is correct. I've said before that more likely the only way for this whole species to change en masse is when it suffers enough. And it doesn't, I don't think it has to be that way. What is your take on that?
I would happen to agree with you. I don't think it has to be that way. If we look into the study of things like the Akashic records or epigenetics in another aspect, we can see that we can learn from the experiences of others and then also genetically pass those experiences down to the next generation. So I don't think the species has to constantly stick their hand in the fire to understand it burns. You can learn that through different methods through consciousness, but unfortunately we've lost connection to a lot of this. So I do think that a lot of people's awakening does happen through suffering, and unfortunately that may be the path that we are on, is just going down so much suffering. The question is, will we awaken? That's the real question. At a collective level, will it be enough to awaken us? And will it be in time is the real question, right? So will it be in time? Because if we go through so much suffering, we may just end up, whether it be going extinct or just the world being in absolute total domination and perpetual slavery forever if we don't get out of it.
Yeah, there's not an unlimited amount of time to turn this around, folks. We're heading toward the cliff, and we will eventually get to that edge and go over it. So we can't sleep on it. We have to make this a moral imperative and understand that we are actively in danger. That doesn't mean that you submit to the fear of that, but the danger is real, and we do not have an unlimited time to turn this ship around, as they say. Let's try to squeeze in at least one more caller. Let's hear from Jennifer. Jennifer, you're live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin of SeedTruth.com. Welcome. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You're unmuted at the server end. All right, we'll come back to you. Let's see if I can go back to someone we tried before, possibly. Let's hear from Gene. Gene, you're live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin. No? Okay. Let's try someone else. Let's go to Curtis. Curtis, you are live on What on Earth is Happening with my special guest, Brandon Martin. Go right ahead.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
So, I'm a former dog kind of reforming himself right now.
Okay.
I got out of the Canadian military in 21, and I spent a while after that just living on savings, so I could basically spend all day, every day, just researching the pharmaceutical companies and kind of less stumbling down the rabbit hole than pencil diving down it.
Right.
And I was going through your show and your podcast, and I'm up to about episode 180 now. But there was something earlier in it I wanted to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
You had described that the dark occult hold self-preservation as a principle.
Right.
Is that unique to Satanism, or is that permeated throughout the entire dark
Yes,
occult?
to clarify, it is that they consider self-preservation the highest dictate, meaning that they will choose to elevate the self at the cost of others even. It doesn't just mean that you're acting in the organism's interest for survival. It means that you are only elevating your own interest, even at the expense of someone else. Brandon, your take on that, and we're almost out of time.
Yeah, I think it relates directly to social Darwinism. And from my studies of the occult, it permeates through all dark occult traditions to be absolutely selfish and only worry about your own personal well-being and your own personal uplift above other people.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening. Check out Brandon Martin's website, SeedTruth.com. Be sure